Sit down, 22C! Stop pretending you know planes!
The whole cabin laughed at her, an ordinary woman in a middle seat, holding a safety card like it meant something. But hours later, over the dark ocean, the sky froze. Navigation failed, and when Air Force One heard her call sign, everything changed forever.
Before you watch full story, comment below. From which country are you watching? Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories.
The gate at Washington Dulles Airport was full of noise. People pushed forward with their bags.
A voice on the speaker said, "Now boarding all passengers for Flight 219 to London."
Emma Blake stood quietly in the line. She was 30 years old, with brown hair tied in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans, a plain black jacket, and old white sneakers. Nobody looked at her twice.
That was exactly how she wanted it. Her ticket showed seat 22C, a middle seat. Most people hated the middle seat, but Emma always chose it. In a middle seat, nobody remembers your face. You are just a shadow between two strangers. For the last 2 years, Emma had lived like a shadow. Quiet, small, forgotten. It was safer that way. Nobody asked questions. Nobody looked too closely. Nobody knew who she used to be. She walked down the long jet bridge and stepped onto the plane. It was a big Boeing aircraft, wide and full. Every seat was sold tonight. Emma walked down the aisle, past families, past businessmen on their phones, past students laughing loudly about their trip. She reached row 22. The window seat had an old woman already sleeping with a small pillow behind her neck. The aisle seat had a young man wearing headphones, looking at his laptop. He did not look up when Emma sat down between them. She placed her small bag under the seat in front of her and pulled out an old paperback book. She had read it many times, but that did not matter. The book was just something to hold, something to look at, so no one would try to talk to her. Around her, the plane filled with sound, babies crying, passengers talking, the flight attendants moving up and down, checking seatbelts. Emma let the noise pass over her like wind, but she was listening. She was always listening. It was a habit she could not turn off.
The captain's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Daniel Reyes. Welcome aboard Flight 219 to London Heathrow. Our flight time tonight will be about 7 hours. Flight attendants, please prepare for departure." The plane began to move. The engines grew louder. Then the plane lifted into the night sky. The lights of the city shrank below them until they disappeared into the clouds. Emma looked out the window for 1 second. The wing lights blinked steadily, red and green against the black sky. Then she looked back at her book and turned the pages slowly, like any normal passenger. But her mind was working. She was counting sounds. She was noticing small changes in the engine noise that most people would never hear. 2 hours into the flight, somewhere high above the ocean, the plane began to shake. At first it felt like normal turbulence. The seatbelt sign turned back on. Cups rattled on the food trays. But Emma noticed something different. The shaking was not random like weather usually is. It had a strange, steady rhythm, and under the noise of the engines, there was a small sound that should not have been there. Emma reached for the safety card in the seat pocket. She had already studied it while boarding, but she looked at it again now, checking the path to the nearest exit, counting the rows, thinking carefully. This was simply how she was trained to think, even after all this time trying to forget. A loud voice broke the quiet. It came from across the aisle. "Look at this," the man said, laughing. He was in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit with his tie loosened. His face was red from the drinks he had already finished. His name, Emma would later learn, was Gary Coleman, a manager at some large company. "Studying to be a pilot, are we?" he said loudly, pointing at Emma with a smile. A few passengers nearby laughed nervously. The turbulence had made everyone tense, and laughing at someone else made them feel a little better.
"I was just checking the safety card," Emma said quietly.
"Oh, checking the safety card," Gary repeated, louder this time, playing to the people around him. "Everybody, seat 22C thinks she knows something we don't." More laughter followed, small and uneasy, but laughter all the same.
Emma felt her face turn warm. Her hands were steady, but her heart beat a little faster. This was exactly why she chose the middle seat. This was why she stayed quiet and small, because moments like this still hurt, even after everything she had been through.
Sit down and relax, Gary said, enjoying the attention. Leave the flying to the real pilots. You don't know anything about planes. Emma folded the safety card and placed it back in the seat pocket. She lowered her head, as if she felt ashamed. To everyone watching, she looked exactly like what they thought she was. Just another passenger who had been embarrassed and put in her place. But underneath that quiet, lowered head, something else was happening. Her eyes were watching the emergency lights along the floor. Her ears were listening carefully to the sounds coming from the front of the plane. Her fingers, folded calmly in her lap, were counting the seconds between each strange vibration in the engine. The young man beside her finally spoke. "Don't mind him," he whispered. "He's been drinking since we boarded." Emma nodded but said nothing. The old woman by the window had woken up and gently patted Emma's hand. "Some people are just rude, dear," she said kindly. Emma gave a small smile and said thank you, but inside, her mind was racing, because what she had heard in the last few seconds told her something serious was happening. The navigation system was failing. Not completely, not yet. But it was breaking down slowly, in a way the pilots were probably just beginning to notice. 20 minutes passed. The cabin had settled again into a quiet, tired rhythm. Most passengers were resting or watching movies. Gary Coleman had stopped talking and fallen asleep with his mouth open. The flight attendants had finished the drink service and moved to their seats to rest. Then the captain's voice returned, and something in his tone had changed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reyes. We are dealing with a small technical issue with our navigation system. Nothing to worry about, but please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The cabin stirred. People who had been sleeping opened their eyes. Whispers spread through the rows. Emma knew what small technical issue really meant in pilot language. It meant something was wrong, and they did not want anyone to panic yet. More minutes passed. The plane moved slightly left, then right, in small, careful movements. These were the kind of corrections pilots make when they are trying to solve a navigation problem. Emma could feel it in her body, the slight shifts in balance, the small changes in engine power. The plane was searching for its true position. Then came the second announcement, and this time the captain's voice was tighter. "This is Captain Reyes again. I need to inform you that we have lost contact with air traffic control, and our main navigation system has failed. We are currently flying on backup instruments. Flight crew, prepare for possible emergency steps." The cabin exploded into fear. People who had been calm were now gripping their armrests. A child began to cry. Someone near the back let out a scream. The flight attendants moved quickly through the aisle, trying to keep everyone calm, but Emma could see the fear behind their careful smiles. "We are going to crash," a woman sobbed a few rows back. Gary Coleman was wide awake now, his face pale, all his earlier confidence gone. His eyes landed on Emma. "Where is your expertise now? 22C, he said, his voice shaking. "Going to fix this with your little safety card?" But Emma was already unbuckling her seatbelt. She stood up calmly while panic spread around her. The young man beside her stared in confusion. The old woman grabbed her hand. "Where are you going, dear?" "It's okay," Emma said softly. "I need to help." She stepped into the aisle and walked steadily toward the front of the plane. Passengers stared at her as she passed, some confused, some hopeful, all desperate for someone, anyone, to know what to do. A flight attendant named Rachel stopped her near the front galley. "Ma'am, you need to sit down. We are in an emergency." Emma looked directly into her eyes. "If I don't help, this plane is not making it to London." Something in her calm voice made Rachel pause. "Are you a pilot?" Rachel asked. "I was," Emma said. "Please, let me talk to the captain." Before Rachel could respond, the cockpit door opened. The first officer, a man named Tom Ellis, stepped out, his face tired and stressed. Behind him, through the open door, Emma could see Captain Reyes leaning over the radio, moving through different channels, hearing only static. "Let me try," Emma said to Tom. He started to shake his head. "Ma'am, only trained crew are allowed." "Falcon,"
Emma said quietly. Just one word. Tom froze. That was not a normal airline call sign. That was a military call sign, and not just any one. Tom had served in the Air Force years before joining the airline. He had heard stories in pilot lounges about a pilot known as Falcon, someone who could fly through storms without instruments, someone who had once protected the president's own plane, someone who was said to have died 3 years ago. "That's not possible," Tom whispered. "Falcon is just a story." "Falcon is someone who doesn't fly anymore," Emma said. "Until tonight." She walked past him into the cockpit. Captain Reyes turned around, surprised to see a small woman in a plain jacket standing in his cockpit during an emergency. His first thought was to send her away, but something in her eyes made him stop. "Who are you?" he asked. "Someone who can help," Emma said, moving toward the radio. "May I?" Reyes looked at Tom, then back at Emma. This was strange, letting a passenger touch the controls during an emergency. But they were far from land, with no navigation and no communication. Strange no longer mattered.
"If you can get anyone on that radio," Reyes said, "please try." Emma's fingers moved over the panel with practiced ease. She skipped past the normal airline channels completely and found controls most passengers and even most commercial pilots never touched Kook 1 military emergency frequencies. She pressed the microphone button, and when she spoke, her voice had changed completely. Gone was the quiet, shy tone from seat 22C. In its place was a clear, steady, commanding voice. "Any station. Any station. This is Falcon. Requesting immediate help. We have a civilian aircraft. Complete navigation failure. Position roughly 1,400 miles from land over the ocean. Requesting escort and guidance to the nearest airport. 260 souls on board. How copy?" The cockpit was silent, except for the soft static of the radio. 5 seconds passed, then 10. Then a deep voice answered, full of respect. "Falcon, this is Hawk 1, United States Air Force. Confirm your last message. Confirm you are Falcon. We were told Falcon was gone 3 years ago." "How copy?"
Emma's hand stayed steady on the microphone.
"Hawk 1, this is Falcon. Very much alive, flying commercial tonight by chance. I repeat, we have a civilian aircraft with navigation failure and no radio contact. I need escort and guidance to the nearest safe airport. Can you help?" There was a pause. Then the answer came. "Falcon, Hawk 1 copies. Stand by for escort. We are sending 4 fighter jets to your position. Estimated arrival, 12 minutes. Eagle Command has been told of your situation." Emma closed her eyes for a second. Eagle Command. That was the code used for the president's own aircraft team. This meant her call had reached far higher than she expected. "Hawk 1, Falcon copies, standing by," she said, setting down the microphone. She turned to face Reyes and Tom. Both men stared at her with shock. "You are actually Falcon," Reyes said. It was not really a question. It was someone trying to accept something impossible.
"I was Falcon," Emma said quietly. "That was a long time ago."
"What are you doing flying commercial in a middle seat?" Tom asked.
"Trying to disappear," Emma said. "It did not work out very well, did it?" Before either man could answer, the radio crackled again.
"Falcon, this is Eagle 1.
Emma's hand paused before reaching for the microphone, because she recognized that voice. Colonel James Hart, the pilot of the president's own aircraft. One of the few people who knew exactly who Falcon had once been and why she had disappeared. She picked up the microphone. "Eagle 1, this is Falcon." "Falcon," Hart said, his voice full of years of both grief and relief. "We thought you were gone. Welcome back." Emma felt something break loose in her chest, something she had kept locked away for 3 years.
"Eagle 1, I'm just trying to get some passengers home safely."
"Copy that, Falcon! But when this is over, we need to talk. A lot of people will want to know you are alive." "Understood, Eagle 1.
"Right now, let's focus on the navigation problem." "Affirmative. Your escort will be with you in 10 minutes. We are clearing an airport for your landing. Every resource we have is yours." "Thank you, Eagle 1. Falcon out."
Emma set down the microphone and turned back to the 2 pilots. Here is what will happen, she said, her voice now calm but firm. You will get a military escort, 4 fighter jets. They will guide us to the nearest safe airport. I will translate their instructions so you can use them. Captain Reyes, you remain in full command of this aircraft. I am only here to help with communication.
Reyes nodded slowly. Who are you, really? Emma thought about how to answer. 3 years ago, I was a pilot with a special unit. My job was to protect important flights, including the president's aircraft, during dangerous missions. One mission went very wrong. I lost my entire team. I survived. They did not. So I left everything behind and became someone else. But tonight, 260 people need me to be Falcon again. So that is who I will be, just for tonight. News of her call sign spread quickly through military channels. In control rooms across the country, officers who had only heard stories about Falcon suddenly found themselves helping guide a rescue for a legend. At the chosen airport, emergency teams gathered quickly. Everyone wanted to be part of the night Falcon came back. Back in the cockpit, Emma worked with Reyes and Tom to figure out their exact position using old backup instruments. Without normal navigation, they had to rely on basic calculations, the kind of flying most modern pilots rarely practiced anymore. But Emma had trained for exactly this kind of situation, back when she flew through areas where normal navigation was jammed on purpose. Soon, 4 fighter jets appeared out of the darkness, taking position around the plane, 2 on each side, their lights glowing steadily against the night sky. Reyes had flown for over 20 years, but had never witnessed anything like this. Military jets escorting a passenger plane across the ocean. "How did you do that?" he asked Emma, his voice full of wonder. "I did not call in the Air Force," Emma said. "I called for help, using emergency channels I was trained to use. They answered because they recognized my call sign and knew I would never use it unless lives were truly at risk." In the cabin behind them, fear slowly turned into something else. Passengers who had been crying minutes before were now watching the jets outside their windows in amazement. A mother lifted her small daughter to see.
"Look, honey,"
she whispered. "Those are the good guys. They came to help us." Gary Coleman sat frozen in his seat, his earlier pride completely gone. He kept thinking about how he had mocked the woman from 22C only an hour before, and now she was the reason they might all survive. The flight continued under escort for the next hour, calm and steady. Finally, lights appeared on the horizon. Land. Safety. The escort jets peeled away one by one, their duty complete, and the plane made its final approach. The wheels touched the runway smoothly, surrounded by flashing lights from fire trucks and ambulances waiting below. As the plane rolled to a stop, the entire cabin broke into applause, tears, and relief. Emma quietly returned to seat 22C to gather her small bag. The young man beside her stared at her with wide eyes. "You are Falcon," he said softly. "I'm just Emma," she replied, sitting down for a moment. The old woman by the window took her hand, tears in her eyes. "You saved us. I don't know how, but you saved us." "The pilots saved us," Emma said gently. "I only helped with communication. But by then, everyone on the plane knew the truth. The quiet woman from seat 22C, the one who had been mocked for looking too closely at a safety card, was Falcon, a name that had once meant everything in certain military circles, a name everyone thought had died 3 years before. Gary Coleman approached her slowly before they left the plane, his face pale with shame. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly, "but I want you to know I was wrong. I judged you before I knew anything about you, and you saved my life tonight anyway." Emma studied him for a moment before answering. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we choose to do after." Then she offered her hand, and he shook it, holding on a little longer than necessary, as if trying to remember this small moment of grace he did not feel he deserved. Within hours, the story spread across the news. A passenger had recorded the fighter jet escort on their phone, and the video reached millions of views by morning. Reporters wanted interviews. Airlines wanted her to teach new safety programs. But Emma remained quiet through it all, watching the story unfold from a distance. She had never wanted fame. She had only wanted to help. A few days later, Emma stood in front of a classroom full of new pilot trainees. They already knew who she was. The story had traveled everywhere. "My name is Emma Blake," she told them. "Call sign Falcon. I am here to teach you something you will not find in your training manuals. I am here to teach you to be ready for the moment when everything goes wrong, because one day it will." She told them about the mission that had taken her whole team, about the guilt she had carried for years, about hiding in seat 22C, hoping nobody would ever notice her again. "But you cannot truly run from who you are," she said. "You cannot hide from your training. When the moment comes, you will either be ready or you will not." She spoke about the passenger who had mocked her for studying the safety card. "Never apologize for being ready," she told the young pilots. "Never feel ashamed for taking safety seriously." The people who laugh at preparation are usually the ones who do not understand it. Months later, Emma returned to flying, this time as a pilot herself, training new crews in emergency procedures based on everything she had learned that night. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer ashamed of the name Falcon, or the woman in seat 22C. She had learned, finally, that surviving was not something to feel guilty about. It was a responsibility to be ready, again and again, whenever she was needed. 6 months after that night, Emma stood in the same terminal at Washington Dulles, waiting to board the very same route to London, but this time she was not walking toward seat 22C. She wore a crisp pilot's uniform, her bag slung over one shoulder, boarding pass in hand for the cockpit. As she walked through the gate, a man stepped forward from the crowd, hesitant, his hands shaking slightly. It was Gary Coleman. He had written to her many times since that night, but this was the first time they had stood face to face again. "I saw you were flying this route today," he said quietly. "I came to say it properly, in person. I was cruel to you that night, and I judged you before I knew a single thing about who you really were."
I have thought about that moment every day since. I am sorry, truly sorry.
Emma studied his face for a long moment. The pride and mockery from that night were gone, replaced by something honest. "I remember," she said, "but I also remember that you kept your word afterward. You did not just apologize once and disappear." "That matters more than the mistake itself." Gary nodded, his eyes wet. "I started a scholarship," he said, "for young pilots who cannot afford flight school. I named it after your squadron. I wanted something good to come out of that night, something beyond just my own shame." Emma felt her throat tighten. "Thank you for that," she said. "That is exactly the kind of thing that honors them." He shook her hand, this time without hesitation, and walked away lighter than he had arrived. Emma boarded the aircraft and settled into the left seat of the cockpit. Her co-pilot smiled at her. "Ready for another trip across the ocean, Captain Blake?" "Always ready," Emma said, and meant it completely. As the plane lifted off into the night sky, climbing away from the lights of the city, Emma looked out at the darkness ahead. Somewhere far below were the people whose lives she had touched. Somewhere above, in the quiet of the stars, were the friends she had lost, the ones who never got the chance to fly home. She made the same silent promise she made every time she flew, that their sacrifice would never be forgotten, and that she would keep showing up, keep training the next generation, keep answering the call whenever it came. She was no longer the invisible woman from seat 22C. She was Falcon and Emma Blake, both at once, flying steady and sure into whatever the sky had waiting for her next.